sold 50% of my portfolio in the last 2 years, and I make more money now than I did then. Isn't that crazy? We've been told this lie that we should never sell properties, hold until you die. But is that really the wisest decision to make? The answer really depends on what your goals are, but you have to understand the math behind it so that you can make decisions that are not based on emotion. A lot of times we keep these properties because we're emotionally tied to them, but they are draining you and dragging you down, and letting go might be the best thing that you do. I had, for the longest, struggled with my current portfolio because I had gotten to a point that I had 50 units. And of course, I had fallen into the trap of doing the vanity count of my doors and all that stuff. But the truth is, who cares about the units when you're not cash flowing the way that you should, right? I fell into the trap of scaling, and I was so busy acquiring properties that I didn't really sit down to look at how these properties were performing before I continued to buy shitty properties on shitty locations. And not only that, some of these properties were making money, but the problem is that they were a headache. And I became a mom, and I really just wanted to have more time. So I really sat down to look at my numbers and analyze, okay, what can I do with my portfolio? We ran the numbers for every single property, and we said, okay, this property, let's refinance. This property, let's sell. This property, let's sell as seller finance. This property will leave as is. So we just kind of went into all of our properties and we created a plan of action. We did that by running the numbers and understanding them. And the thing is that a lot of investors really don't know what those numbers are. The main matrix that drives these kind of decisions is called the return on equity, also called the cash on equity. It is basically the matrix that tells you how is your capital performing. So as investors, right, we buy a property and they appreciate, and you're building something that is called equity. The difference between what your property is worth and the loan that you have is your equity. When you look at your annual cash flow divided over that equity, that's the number that you care for. So let's say you have a property that cash flows $10,000 a year, right? Then that same property is worth $500,000 and you have a $450,000 loan, right? So 500 minus 450 equals 50,000. Now, 10,000 a year of cash flow divided by 50,000 is 20% return. That's a great return. You should keep this property. Let's assume that same property is worth 700,000, right? So at that point, you have $250,000 in equity. So 10,000 over 250,000, the number changes, right? You go from making 20% return to making 4% return. And that's what happens over time as you pay off your mortgages, your tenants pay off your mortgages, your return on equity continues to go down. So what can you do in this case? You could refinance, but you would have to run the numbers to make sure that the property still cash flows if you refinance. The second option would be, can you sell it? If you sell it, how much would you cash out? How much taxes will you pay? All these things come into that. The question is, what would you do with those funds, right? Are you going to be able to reinvest these funds and make more than 4%? If the answer is no, then you continue to hold the property at this point in time and reassess later. If you know that you can make more than 4% return, the question is then, what would make it worth for you to sell it? If somebody said to me, hey, Kat, I have an opportunity for you and you're going to make 15% return, I'll probably go right away and sell this property. So the return equity is one aspect of it, but I'm also going to look at other factors like, is this property a headache? Is this property a great neighborhood? Am I ever going to be able to find a property like this, right? All these different things. So what you can do at this point is really do a pros and cons approach and be like, why should I keep? What should I sell? There's so many factors that can come into a selling a property. That could be, I need the cash for something else. I am done investing in this market. I'm trying to venture into a new strategy like new builds. All these different things come into play when you're making a decision to sell, but you're making it based off numbers. So the numbers usually are going to be your starting point, and then you continue to add. Now, there will be times where you have properties that you really want to sell because the partnership that you're in, it doesn't work out anymore, because it's a headache, because you're tired of it, you really just want to get rid of it, and you might not be able to sell it because the numbers don't make sense. Is it okay to take a loss at that point? And that is a question that I struggled with for a while until I ended up having to do that. We had a property that we recently sold for a loss of $34,000, but this property was just draining our energy, our peace, everything. And honestly, it wasn't worth it. And sometimes losing money is the win. And this might be contrary to everything you've learned before, but you got to take that into account as well. Sometimes you got to lose money to make more money down the road, because if all your energy is so focused on one property that you can't think beyond that because you're constantly having to be dragged back into that property, back into that problem, you cannot move forward and make decisions that will make you more money down the road. So that is how I ended up making the decision to downsize my portfolio, by looking at the numbers, by deciding whether these properties align with my strategy these days. And the result was more money, ironically, even though I lost money. And so I highly encourage you to look at your portfolio in more detail and figure out, is it performing as it should? And if it's not, what can you do about it? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about this. I completely understand if you disagree with my approach of selling at a loss or my approach on just selling in general, but I would like to know. If you want to learn more about how to understand numbers for your rentals or financial literacy in general, make sure you follow my channel and stay tuned for the next video in this series.